Should the Boston Celtics sign Ben Simmons? The dude's reportedly got his athleticism back. I don't even know how that's possible. Team out west is apparently willing to offer him a training camp spot. Could the Celtics be interested? Who knows? But we're here to talk you into it. I'm your boy Adam Taylor. This is my homie, Mr. Tim Sheils, and this is the Celtics Chronicle podcast. What's good?
Nothing much, dude. Honestly, very, very intrigued by the idea of that. You posed it to me. We were thinking of drumming up ideas, and that's one that I know is going to be polarizing for a litany of different reasons.
Yeah, and what better summer to go out there and absolutely screw with your fan base even more than the one where you flip Jaylen Brown for Paul George? Jokes aside, though, the worst case scenario with a Ben Simmons pickup is that you cut him down the line, or that he doesn't perform great. Best case scenario, he plays really good defense. He operates as a playmaker for you. You just do not ask him to shoot very much, and you're going to be fine. Now, if the athleticism's there, now you have the one thing Brad Stevens was talking about at the end of last season in a guy that can pressure the rim, he can get you dunks and layups, and it gives you a little bit of that downhill pressure you lost when you traded away Jaylen Brown. Doing that at a veteran minimum and just taking a flyer, look, it's not the worst idea in the world. I can hear people on the other ends of their screens right now. If they're listening on their phones, I can hear everybody screaming right now. Don't do this. You're wasting your time. Fuck no. I can hear people calling us really nasty names, and that's fine. I'm with it. If you are doing so, that means you're already subscribed to the channel or you subscribe to the audio podcast. If you're doing it just because you found us today and you want to be pissed off with us less, I really advise that you stick around, hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. Make sure you head over to one of the audio platforms and subscribe to the show there too. We're not always going to be trying to talk you into a dude that has been absolutely atrocious for multiple years. But 15th and final roster spot, end of rotation on a minimum contract. I think Ben Simmons, if he does have his athleticism back, I don't think it's the worst move in the world.
Yeah, and that's a huge caveat. And hey, look, I'm not trying to sell you a bridge somewhere. Ben Simmons is probably one of the better options that you could have for the final spot on this roster. And it's also just in terms of a low buy, high ceiling, that's a pretty good move for a team that right now, in terms of their point guard depth, unless you're reverting Derek White into a ball handling role, outside of Peyton Pritchard, you added Mike Conley, which is another guy we'll talk about at some point. It's a thin position on this roster in terms of playmakers outside of Jason Tatum. That's a thin position for this team. And I think adding a guy that's got the size that Simmons does, that has the passing creativity, has the passing vision, I certainly don't think that at the veteran minimum or a partially guaranteed deal or a training camp deal, I don't think there's really a ton of downside. If it's a concern about where he's at mentally, then that's a whole different story. I think this is a guy who really is trying hard to get back into the league, and I don't think that's necessarily an easy thing, especially for someone who's dealt with all these back issues, something that plagued him a lot when he was in Brooklyn specifically. But we also seen him play relatively well for a couple other teams. He had some shining moments with the Clippers as well. And look, again, we're talking the last roster spot. You're not expecting him to give you a ton, which means if he does give you a decent amount, that's a massive upgrade. For what you're getting out of a 15th roster spot, that's a pretty big swing for that position. And I certainly think there's a lot more to gain than there is to lose by signing him. And again, injuries you can't control. And so there's no telling what this guy's going to be able to do athletically. But if he's willing to try and come into a roster where all he's going to be asked to do is just create for others, attack the rim, and play defense, okay, I'm willing to take that dice roll if he is.
I also think Mazzulla is one of the only head coaches that would be absolutely fine with deferring at the rim. He would be completely okay with Ben Simmons driving downhill time and time again, drawing the defense and kicking out. He's not going to be pissed that you're not dunking the rock. He's not going to be pissed that you're not trying to force a contested layup. He's going to cheer you on for kicking the ball because he knows that the team has the shooters and it's part of the system to run that spray offense. So I think that even the worst version of Simmons, or not the worst, but close to the worst version of Simmons, is still a guy that fits in with the way the Celtics are trying to play. Defensively, he's got the size, the length. He can play multiple defensive positions from the 1, arguably up to the 5. Like, he's a truly switchable defender. And there was a point in time where he was one of the better defenders in the NBA. Now, I know we're probably 5 or 6 years removed from when that was the case, But the point being is you don't become what was it, all defensive first team 2 years running, 2020 and 2021. You don't make back-to-back all defensive teams unless you are not only a talented defender, but high IQ defender. And I think that when you add him into a Celtics rotation that really prioritizes defense, if you can get high level defense out of Paul George when healthy, and you can get high level defense out of Ben Simmons, and you go down the list of the currently established guys, Derek White being there, I think that they can really lean on that identity as one of these teams that are going to shut you down, make it hard to score on. They're going to run up the floor and just absolutely smoke you from deep or from at the rim. I do like the idea of just adding that extra size and playing with a jumbo guard from time to time. And look, Mazzulla's also been super successful in generating good roles for non-shooting talent. A lot of it's screen and handoff. The hardest part is, and this is the biggest drawback for me, I think you're completely fine when you've got one non-shooter on the floor, but the Celtics just went and got Mitch Robinson, so now there's always going to be a non-shooter on the floor at the 5. And adding another non-shooter in terms of Ben Simmons would really screw with your overall spacing. And that would be my biggest, if you wanted me to play devil's advocate here, or at least speak some logic, the biggest reason I'd be against it is because having 2 non-shooters on the floor at the same time won't work. The only way you could do it realistically is to stagger Luka Garza to be on the floor for significant amount of minutes when Ben Simmons is on the floor, because then you do have that shooter. But then how do you manage the minutes of Nimi and Mitch Robinson? How do you make that work there? So that's the biggest pushback I've got against our kind of we should go and get Ben Simmons narrative. It's really hard to keep elite spacing when 2 dudes can't shoot the 3.
I think the only thing that you can really do in those situations is have Simmons just viciously attack the basket and get some pick and roll actions involving Mitch Robinson. I think that's really the only way that you're going to be able to sustain an offense if you're not expecting Simmons to shoot or to work on that jump shot, which at this point, maybe he's taken some time and worked on things, but I think most of that at this point is just mental. And if it's a matter of getting where his head needs to be at in order to get confident in that jump shot, or even at least be able to like pull some middies, okay. But I think the real benefit of having him there would actually help guys like Peyton Pritchard, because I think Peyton Pritchard is a great guy who could set people up on the floor. He showed again and again, continues to add more wrinkles to his game. And I think what he's been able to do as a playmaker for others is almost just as great as his own shooting prowess, and the way he's added, we talked about a little bit with that bump shot that he gets where he creates space with his body when he's driving to the hoop. Just the fact that you'd be able to take the ball out of his hands a little bit opens up some off-ball action for Pritchard where you can get him open for some shots. And I think that's really like the benefit of having a guy like Simmons, where you have a guy who has that court vision, who can open it up for some of your more elite shooters coming off the bench, whether it's Sam Hauser, Baylor Shireman, Peyton Pritchard, like Hugo Gonzalez as well. And we're going to talk about him at some point, not today, but talk about him as a playmaker as well. I think the biggest issue there is trying to figure out how it would work with the bigs. And the only thing I could really think of is outside of Simmons trying to take some middies to keep people honest, where you have some pick and pop, where he's working on the short roll, or vice versa, where you have Mitch Robinson in the fold there. I think it's just going to be a matter of just viciously attacking the rim. And maybe that's what the Celtics use, is almost like a change of pace, where you see a lot of space and pace with the 3-pointers and trying to generate a lot of 3-point looks when you have your optimal shooting lineup out there. And then also when you really need to get nitty gritty and you want to lock down on defense, you would put out a guy like Simmons and just viciously attack with the pick and roll, whether it's you're putting out a big lineup, whether it's Garza, who can add some spacing, adds a little bit more offensive power at the cost of that defensive value there, or you're getting Mitch Robinson involved in that pick and roll. It creates problems, but I also think that if there's a guy who can get the most out of Ben Simmons at this point in his career, I would probably list Joe Mazzulla on the short list of guys who find a way to get the most out of all of their individual players and highlight their skills.
I agree there 100%. I think that Joe and the development staff there will be the ones that really tasked Simmons with finding that best version of himself. Now, the biggest concern I have is if your best way of getting him to be valuable to you is for him to viciously attack the rim, you're in trouble, because for the last, 2-3 years of his career, maybe 4, he hasn't viciously attacked anything. It's been so passive. he'll get downhill, but it's not with the same force that he did in his early years. He doesn't really bully drive it the same. He's not as explosive. He hasn't been as explosive, been very unwilling to fight through contact. If you're getting that version of Ben Simmons, then I don't see how you can have a functioning offense when you've got Nimi or Mitch there. Not in the within Mazzulla's system being what I'm saying here. If you get a version of Ben Simmons that obviously isn't as good at his first 3 or 4 or 5 years in the league, but is better than what we've seen in recent years. There is some aggression there. There is some explosiveness there. If you get that version, a middle of the road, then yeah, you could probably run him off the pinch post. You can put him in elbow actions where he faces up and beats guys off the bounce. You can have him coming in off shuffle cuts. You can do about 100 different things where he's off ball, gets the ball, dunks it, off ball, get the ball, kicks it out, does whatever. There's a world there where you can scheme for him being on the floor with another non-shooting big, and you can use his movement as a way to create gravity. And that's a realistic approach to doing so. It's just not knowing whether that version of Simmons is what's going to be walking through the door. And you might get that version in training camp. And then once the season starts and the physicality jumps, are you still going to get that version? And if you do, and he becomes a key component of the rotation, what happens once the postseason starts and the physicality takes another jump? Are you going to be able to rely on him through steps A, B, and C? And that's a question that you won't know unless you give him a shot. And it sounds like there's going to be at least one team out there that offers him a deal. And when I'm looking at the Celtics right now, worst case scenario, you let him bounce in a year. Best case scenario, you just found a guy that can give you, I don't know, 10 and 10 or close to a triple-double, a low triple-double, depending on where he is in his athleticism and stuff. But it's found money. And it would also be great to be the team that gets the best out of Simmons when the Sixers have just taken Jaylen Brown. That would be nice too.
Yeah, and it's also not the first time. I don't think it was this offseason. It might have been last offseason where Ben Simmons was tied to the Celtics. There was some interest to some degree at one point or another. So it wouldn't be the most unheard of thing ever for the Celtics to have interest in a guy, and within a couple years or a couple seasons, you see that guy end up in green. We saw it with Porzingis. We saw it eventually with Blake Griffin. And Blake Griffin was also, I think, a year or two. I think the year that he ended up joining the Nets, he was rumored to be interested with the Celtics as well. There's a potential world where he ends up on this roster. Ben Simmons, not Blake. I love Blake, but I miss him. But I digress. I think just the idea of having that option, I think having another playmaking option would be good. I just think flat out, I think the Celtics right now, I have some concerns unless you see some big jumps from Hugo, depending on entirely what role you're going to have for Peyton Pritchard and Derek White. I worry about where the secondary and tertiary playmakers are going to be on this roster. Not even just to have them on the floor at the same time, but just to be able to say you've got some guys on your bench that can help run your offense if you need to give Tatum some rest. Because we don't know what we're going to be getting out of Paul George. You have some concerns, and I do want to kind of walk back some of the concerns from last year in terms of games played, because people forget he was suspended for 20 some odd games
which is a problem in itself, but it's a different problem.
It's a different problem. And then when you look into it, it's not as bad as it seems because it was a whole mental health thing. And I just don't want to, downgrade that
we
as
can
well,
just move away from that.
Yeah. But more so just if you're worried about durability, and that's a fair thing to be concerned about with not only a guy like Paul George, but with Ben Simmons. Yeah, adding guys who might have some health concerns, I can see why there would be some hesitancy. I actually think that beyond just worrying about like where his shooting is and where his athleticism might be, that's the biggest concern for me would be injuries. But again, if you're getting him on a low value deal, it's again not the worst thing you could possibly do. And again, like you were talking about before, this is a guy who was like all NBA defense.
2 years running.
That's not a small thing. I don't care how many years removed he is, because I don't think it was a matter of his talent getting him out of the league. It was a matter of him not living up to the expectation of that talent. And I think that's really that's the crux of the situation for me is his body going to break down trying to be something he's not anymore? Or like, where is he at physically? And I think we're going to see some of that. I know he's supposed to be playing, I think internationally he's supposed to be playing with the Australian team, right? That's where his turn is back, if I remember correctly.
Probably. That's going to be a really good litmus test for him. What I will say is it's wild, right? Because a few years ago, 5 years ago or so, Simmons looked like he was on a path to superstardom. He was genuinely on a path to being one of the best players in the NBA. He was finished 2020. I've got the numbers up here. 2021 finished second in Defensive Player of the Year ratings. Averaged in that 2021 season 14.3 points, 6.9 assists, 7.2 rebounds to the game. He was 24. He genuinely felt like a guy that was going to be dominant for years, and then everything just went wrong for him. Obviously, a lot of people point to that playoff game where he kicked out rather than finishing and the team got eliminated. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
And that was the turning point for him. But I do think that if you look at just what happened to him after when he came back in his first season with Brooklyn, and it was like 6.7 points, 6.3 rebounds, 6.1 assists, and that was like not Simmons. Passive Simmons was still averaging basically 6, and 6. Oh, it was a devil's number, but you get what I'm saying. He was averaging a solid stat line, and he was starting games then. I guess he'd be coming off the bench for Boston. But what I'm trying to get at is his box score production at least would still be enough that you're more than happy to pay a veteran minimum for. It's the other stuff. It's the connectivity. It's how quickly you can move on defense, the decision making, the processing speed. What's there? What isn't? Is he going to be able to make reads at a high level? Is he going to be willing to be aggressive? Does he fit the system defensively? Is he going to be willing to put his body on the line when you need him to? Celtics fans aren't going to be happy if he just watches a ball roll out of bounds. Not when we're so used to seeing guys just throw their bodies on the floor and put themselves. And I'm not advocating for people putting themselves at risk, but there's a certain level of competitiveness that comes with being on the Celtics parquet. And I think that's a big issue. Not knowing whether he's going to be able to do that, and more importantly, be willing to do that. But you learn these things through training camp. You learn what players are willing to do, how far they're willing to go to prove themselves, because competition's high. He won't be the only one fighting for that 15th and final roster spot. The Celtics haven't made their camp invites yet. So I think that it's worth exploring, but it's not necessarily worth pushing too hard, like from our standpoint or as a fan standpoint. I think there's going to be other teams involved. But when I do look at the free agency market right now, I'd take Simmons over DeRozan for what Boston needs, not for talent, but for what Boston needs, just that caveat in there. I'd take him over Beal as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure that probably will try. We talked about potentially doing a Beal episode, and once you posed Ben Simmons, I was like, that actually made my antenna stick up a little bit on that. So I think that ultimately it's where he's at mentally, because I think that goes into that competitive drive. And that's been something, honestly, that was a knock on him going into the draft. And he was still, it's a top pick. That guy was a top pick, and it was still a point of contention for him. Was his motor there? Is his drive there? And for a guy who's 30, who's trying to fight to get back into the NBA, who wants to play basketball for a living, that motor better be there. And I imagine it has to be, because for him at this point, like this, you're fighting tooth and nail to make a living in the NBA, to be a professional athlete. And that's not an easy task. And for a guy who's had a litany of different things thrown at him over the years. And again, like you mentioned, like that nexus point from shoot a three, you coward, to passing off that easy layup in that Hawks series, that really was the nail in the coffin. And it was just a spiral down the toilet bowl at that point. And so for him to try and make it out of that now, and to try and get back and be close to what he was, or even just be a contributing player on a successful team, it's a tall order, but I think it's something that obviously he wants to do. Now, from the perspective of, are we going to be pushing for this? No, I don't think I'm necessarily pushing for it as much as I'm interested enough to give it a dice roll. And I think you need to acknowledge that. I think we're not saying this is a lock. We're not saying that he's going to come in and be lights out. I just think based on his skill set and what we even saw in his last couple of years between the Clippers, between the Nets, between his last few years with the 76ers, you saw what he could do production-wise in terms of playmaking, obviously based on his size, his rebounding, the defensive versatility. Does that stick if his athleticism isn't there? That's a whole other talking point where you have to see where he's at physically, but there's a lot more to like about it than I have to hate. And of course, the extra caveat of rubbing it in Philly's face of, hey, we got this guy to be productive, and we have him on really small money, and he's just playing this role off the bench to a T, that'd be perfect. But I know that
The
yeah, it's
dream
the dream
scenario is he comes back and he's all NBA first team defense.
Yeah.
And you're just laughing at Philly like, dude, we got one of your best players in recent years back. You can keep 55-year-old LeBron James and 104-year-old LeBron James and 300-year-old LeBron James. You can keep all versions of LeBron. We don't care. You can keep JB. As far as I'm concerned, at this point, he's gone. He's the ops. You can keep everybody over there because we just gone and got Ben Simmons back to being an all-NBA defender. Is that going to happen? I really doubt it. I'd say it's like a 99.9999999% chance that does not happen.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
There's always a chance. Just the same as I said this the other day. If I ever meet a vampire, I'm going to make him turn me into a vampire. And my wife was like, "There are no such thing as vampires." And I'm like, "But there's a chance."
Just a sliver.
Yeah, just send me to New Orleans. But jokes aside, anyway, I would, under the right circumstances, yes, I would sign Ben Simmons, but there would be a lot of hurdles I would have to make him jump through before I'd be willing to even put an offer sheet in front of him. Do I think he can do that? Probably. I think that if he's willing to make a comeback, he knows what's been expected of him and how low his stock is around the NBA. He's regained his athleticism is really encouraging, but also really vague. So I think that's a bit of an issue there. But yeah, if you asked me and you were like, would you take Ben Simmons for 1 year on a vet minimum deal with this roster, with what they need as an additional playmaker? Yes, I would.
Yeah, agreed. I've certainly seen them use him for worse positions, for sure.
Yeah. Dude, it could be way worse.
Could be Ennis Freedom.
We could go back to bringing Brad Wanamaker back. No shade to Brad. Oh, I did Brad Wanamaker, to be fair.
I miss Shane Larkin.
Shane Larkin was a EuroLeague G. With that, everybody, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. So show some love to Tim on social. Show some love to the Celtics Chronicle newsletter. And we will be back soon. Please don't shout at us too much in the comments, but definitely share your opinion. Peace.
Cheers.